He saved a billionaire's dog, then sent back her check. He did it a second time, then a third. It wasn't about the money. It was about the wall in his apartment she wasn't supposed to see. The father was Leo, a man whose world was measured in double shifts and daycare bills. The billionaire was Vivian Thorne, for whom money was a language of solutions. Her gratitude was real. His refusal was absolute. This documentary explores the collision of two entirely different economies, one of wealth, the other of human connection, and the mystery she had to solve. To understand the refusal, you have to understand the man. Leo Garza's life was a meticulously balanced equation of time and debt. He worked 2 jobs. Days were spent as a maintenance supervisor at the Agging Oakwood Apartments complex, fixing leaky faucets and stubborn locks. Nights, 3 times a week, he stocked shelves at a grocery warehouse. The math was simple, brutal, and left no room for error. His paycheck from the apartments covered rent on their 1-bedroom unit. The warehouse pay covered everything else: groceries, utilities, clothes for his daughter Maya, and the slow, grinding repayment of the medical bills that had outlived his wife. Elena had died 2 years earlier, a sudden aneurysm that left no time for goodbyes, only bills. She was the one who had believed in softness, in what she called unnecessary kindness. Leo, a practical man by necessity, had often teased her for it. Now he found himself silently committed to it, a strange, quiet way of keeping her voice in the world. Maya was 6. She had her mother's dark, thoughtful eyes and a ferocious love for animals, which is why they were walking to the park that Saturday afternoon along Crestview Drive, a busy 4-lane artery that cut through the city's quieter neighborhoods. Vivian Thorne's world operated on a different scale of mathematics. As the founder and CEO of Thorne Solutions, a private equity firm specializing in distressed tech startups, her currency was leverage, turnaround, and 9-figure exits. Her gratitude, like everything else, was efficient and transactional. She was in the city closing a deal, staying in a penthouse suite that cost more per night than Leo's monthly rent. Her constant companion was a spirited, agging border collie named Argos, a gift from her late father and the only creature she allowed to see her unguarded. The incident was a matter of seconds, a failure of a fancy leather leash clip. Argos, spotting a squirrel across the street, lunged. The clip snapped. The dog shot into the road just as a delivery truck rounded the bend. Leo didn't think. He dropped Maya's hand, yelled stay, and moved. He wasn't a large man, but years of manual labor had made him strong and startlingly fast. He didn't run onto the road. He angled himself, calculated the trajectory, and scooped Argos into his arms in a single fluid motion, spinning his back to the traffic as the truck's horn blared and it swerved, missing them by inches. The whole event took less than 5 seconds. Maya on the curb didn't scream. She just covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes enormous. Vivian Thorne witnessed it all from the sidewalk, frozen, a scream trapped in her throat. By the time she reached them, Leo was already setting a shaken but unharmed Argos down, checking the dog over with rough, gentle hands. Her thanks were profuse, frantic. She pulled out her phone, asked for his details, insisted on repaying him. Leo, his heart still hammering from the adrenaline, just shook his head. He's okay. That's what matters. Come on, Maya. He took his daughter's hand and walked away, leaving a stunned billionaire and her dog on the curb. The first check arrived 3 days later, $5,000. It was delivered by a courier in a suit to the Oakwood Apartments manager's office. Leo found the crisp envelope in his mailbox. He looked at the amount, written in elegant script. He thought of the hospital bill for $1,400 still on his fridge. He thought of Maya's worn-out winter coat. Then he thought of Elena and the peculiar, unshakable principle she had lived by, that the moment you put a price on a good deed, you cheapen the goodness itself. He didn't cash it. He sent it back. He enclosed a simple note on a piece of paper torn from Maya's drawing pad. Not necessary. Glad Argos is safe. Vivian Thorne received the returned check in her office. She was perplexed. In her experience, people refused money as a negotiating tactic to appear virtuous before naming a higher price. This felt different. The note was genuine. It annoyed her, then intrigued her. A week later, a second check arrived. This one was for $25,000. The courier this time was instructed to hand it directly to Leo. The amount was life-changing. It could erase the medical debt. It could mean quitting the night job. Leo held the check, his fingers leaving faint smudges on the pristine paper. He sat at his small kitchen table for a long time. He imagined the relief. Then he imagined explaining it to Maya and to the memory of his wife. He sent it back. No note this time. This refusal moved Vivian from intrigue to outright fascination. It defied all logic. She ran a background check, a standard due diligence she performed on anyone who entered her orbit. She learned about Elena, about the medical debt, about the 2 jobs. The facts made his refusal not just puzzling, but incomprehensible. Her assistant suggested perhaps he was religious or morally opposed to wealth. Vivian dismissed that. This was personal. She felt for the first time in years that she had misread a human being entirely. So she sent a 3rd check, $100,000. It was a test, a gauntlet thrown down. This time, the envelope contained a handwritten line on her personal stationery. Please, allow me to clear your debt. Leo found the envelope taped to his apartment door. The amount stole his breath. It felt less like gratitude and more like an assault, a bulldozer trying to flatten a principle it couldn't understand. A cold anger settled in him. This woman with all her power was refusing to hear his no. She was treating his value system as a problem to be solved with more zeros. He didn't just send it back. He drove to the post office and sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. He wanted her to know without a doubt that it had been rejected. He included a final, blunt note. The debt is mine to carry. The help was free. When Vivian received the 3rd return check with its definitive note, something in her shifted. The puzzle had become an obsession. The financial transaction had failed. The only currency left was presence. She cancelled her afternoon meetings. She had her driver take her to the address listed on the background check. She needed to look this man in the eye and ask one question: why? As her black sedan pulled up to the modest, slightly rundown Oakwood apartments, she saw him. He was in the doorway of a ground-floor unit, arms crossed, as if he'd been expecting her. And behind him, through the open door, she caught a glimpse of the living room wall. It wasn't painted a normal color. It was covered, every square inch, in pieces of paper. It wasn't art, it wasn't wallpaper. It was a mosaic of handwritten notes, cards, post-its, and letters layered over one another like scales. Vivian Thorne, a woman who read financial reports and legal contracts for a living, stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes scanning the text. Thank you for the groceries, Leo. I paid for the person behind me at the coffee shop. Signed, a single mother from 3B, you didn't have to fix my bike. I used the bus fare you gave me to get to my job interview. I got the job. I bought lunch for the security guard. Signed, a teenager, the spare tire got me home. I helped a man change his tire on the interstate last week. He cried. Signed, a trucker. Each note was a transaction, but not the kind Vivian understood. They were receipts for kindness, logged not in a ledger but on a wall. The central governing rule was handwritten on a piece of cardstock pinned in the middle. Take what you need, give what you can, pass it on, no paybacks. Leo watched her, his arms still crossed, but his expression had shifted from defensive to something quieter, almost resigned. He hadn't wanted an audience for this. It's for Maya, he said, his voice low. So she knows the kind of person her mother was. So she knows there are other ways to live. Vivian stepped inside without asking. The apartment was clean but worn, the air smelling of soap and toast. She moved toward the wall, her camel coat brushing against a small kitchen chair. She began to read in earnest, her finger tracing the lines of a letter written in a shaky, elderly hand. Dear Leo, the medicine you picked up when I had the flu saved me a trip I couldn't make. I taught my granddaughter to bake cookies that weekend. We took them to the fire station. You started that. The dates spanned years, reaching back before his wife's death. Her billion-dollar brain, trained to assess value and ROI, short-circuited. The wall represented a closed economic system she had no key for. Every offer of money she'd sent was not just rejected. It was a foreign currency, worthless here. You do all this, while working 2 jobs, with this debt, she asked, gesturing vaguely at the space around them. Leo finally unfolded his arms. The debt is a number in a computer. It doesn't hurt anyone, being cold, being hungry, being alone. That hurts. I can fix some of those things. Elena, she showed me that. The money you wanted to give me was for the past. For a bill. This, he said, pointing at the wall, is for the future. It's for the next person and the next. It doesn't end with me. Vivian was silent for a full minute, a lifetime in a conversation. She thought of her own life, a series of acquisitions and mergers. Her gratitude was a check. Her apologies were donations. Her father's voice came back to her, the self-made man who told her, "Vivian, never give something for nothing. Even charity needs a strategy." She had built an empire on that principle. This wall, this man, declared it not just wrong, but hollow. "Tell me about one," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. She pointed to a small crayon drawing pinned among the letters. It was of a stick-figure man handing a giant lollipop to a stick-figure girl. Leo sighed, the fight gone out of him. He sat down at the small table. "That's from Emma, she's 9, lives in 401 with her dad. He's a good guy, works nights at the plant. Emma has a big heart, always bringing home strays. Found a kitten in the dumpster last winter. They couldn't afford the vet. The kitten had an infection. I drove them, paid the bill, it was $80. He paused. Emma came down a week later with that drawing and a jar of pennies and nickels. She'd been saving for a video game. It was $17.42. She gave it to me. I told her I couldn't take her savings. She said, "It's not for you, it's for the next kitten." He looked at Vivian, "So I took it, and I used it 2 weeks later when old Mr. Gable in 203 locked himself out. I called a locksmith, used Emma's money to tip him extra. Mr. Gable makes wooden toys. He made Emma a dollhouse to say thanks." Leo gestured to a small, intricately carved wooden ornament hanging from a nail. "He gave me that. The chain keeps going. That $17 has probably done $500 worth of good by now. Your check would have stopped it. It would have landed in my bank account and just sat there, dead." The psychological mechanism was suddenly, breathtakingly clear to Vivian. Leo wasn't refusing wealth. He was protecting a living ecosystem. Neuroscience calls it the helper's high, the brain releasing oxytocin and dopamine during acts of generosity, creating a literal chemical reward. For Leo, and for the people on his wall, this intrinsic reward was the point. Extrinsic rewards, like cash, didn't amplify the system. They risked corrupting it, turning an altruistic impulse into a transaction. Studies show that offering money for a pro-social act can actually undermine the innate desire to do it. Vivian felt a profound sense of dislocation. She had come to solve a problem, to fix his stubbornness with a bigger check or a better argument. Instead, she was being schooled in a form of calculus she'd never encountered. Her eyes fell on a recent addition, a note on a piece of receipt paper. "Leo, used your get-out-of-jail-free card, flat tire on the highway. A guy in a beat-up Ford stopped and helped. Wouldn't take cash, told him about the wall, he smiled, keep the change." It was signed by Maya's kindergarten teacher. "You track it all?" Vivian asked. "Don't track it. They tell me, they come by, they leave a note. Sometimes they just tell me the story. Maya loves it. She calls it the kindness wall. She thinks it's magic." He finally looked directly at Vivian, his gaze steady. "That's why I sent your checks back. It wasn't about pride. It was about contamination. You were trying to pay a debt that doesn't exist in this room. If I took that money, it would mean that saving Argos was for a price. And it wasn't. I saw a dog in danger. I moved, that's all. The value is in the dog being alive, not in your bank account." Vivian's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her assistant, probably wondering about the missed meetings. She ignored it. For the first time in maybe a decade, the outside world, with its demands and valuations, seemed irrelevant. "What if," she said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke, "the money wasn't for you? What if it was added to the ecosystem, to the chain?" Leo shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "You don't get it. Big money breaks the chain. It turns it into a project, a charity. It becomes about your money, not their need. The magic is in the scale, a tank of gas, a bag of groceries, a vet bill, a locksmith tip, things one person can do for another without it ruining them. Your money would be a boulder in a stream. It would dam the flow, not help it." He stood up and walked to the wall, touching the edge of the cardstock motto. "Elena figured this out. She said the world runs on 2 economies, the money economy, which is loud and breaks down all the time, and the care economy, which is quiet and never stops. She invested in the second one. This wall is my dividend." Vivian Thorne, billionaire, felt something unfamiliar, humility and a sharp, specific shame. Her investigations, her checks, her dramatic arrival, they were all part of the loud, broken economy crashing into a quiet, functioning one. She had been the problem. She looked at the envelope still in her hand, the 4th check she had intended to force into the situation. It felt absurd now, a worthless token. "So what do you want?" she asked, the question stripped of all strategy. "I wanted you to understand why I said no," Leo said. "And now you do, so you can go. The story ends here. You don't owe me anything, just maybe next time you want to say thank you, don't reach for your checkbook first, just say it. And then keep your eyes open. Someone else might need your help more." He was dismissing her, politely, firmly. In that moment, Vivian realized she didn't want to be dismissed. The puzzle was solved, but the picture it revealed had captivated her. She thought of her sterile penthouse, her deals, her father's legacy of transactional relationships. She thought of Argos, who loved her without any understanding of net worth. And she looked at the wall, a chaotic, beautiful testament to a different way to be human. She didn't hand him the envelope. Instead, she tore it in half, then in half again, and let the pieces fall into a small trash bin by the door. The gesture was shockingly physical in the quiet room. "Okay," she said, "no checkbook." She took a deep breath. "But you said the rule is pass it on. So I'm in the chain now. You saved Argos, that's my entry point. I need to pass it on, but I don't know how to do what you do." Leo studied her, seeing the genuine confusion beneath the polished exterior. "It's not a program, you just live differently. You see someone carrying a heavy stroller upstairs, you help. You see a neighbor looking lonely, you say hello. You have a skill, you offer it." Vivian almost laughed. She could orchestrate a corporate takeover, but couldn't conceptualize simple kindness. "It feels insufficient." "That's because you're still thinking in your economy," he said, "where size equals significance. In this one, sincerity is the only currency that matters." At that moment, the front door opened and a little girl burst in, her backpack bouncing. Maya. She stopped short, seeing the well-dressed stranger. Her eyes went to her father, checking for safety, then back to Vivian with open curiosity. "Daddy, who's that?" "This is Ms. Thorne, sweetie. She owns Argos, the dog from the park." Maya's face lit up. "Is Argos okay?" "He's perfect," Vivian said, her voice softening in a way that surprised even her. "Thanks to your dad." Maya nodded as if this was the expected outcome. She dropped her backpack and went to the wall, standing on her tiptoes to pin a new drawing. It was of a dog and a squirrel, with a smiling man in between. "I made this for the wall, for Argos." She looked at Vivian. "Do you want to see my room? I have a hamster." Vivian, who had negotiated with prime ministers, found herself disarmed by a 6-year-old's invitation. "I would love to." She followed Maya down a short hallway, leaving Leo in the living room with his wall and his thoughts. As she passed the open bathroom door, she saw more notes taped to the mirror. This wasn't just a wall, it was a philosophy that had seeped into every corner of their lives. In Maya's room, Vivian saw a small, framed photo of a smiling woman on the bedside table. Elena. The room was an explosion of color and life, starkly different from the minimalist, curated spaces Vivian inhabited. Maya proudly showed off her hamster, then a shelf of rocks she'd collected, each with a story. Vivian listened, truly listened. And as she did, a dangerous, unbusinesslike idea began to form in her mind. It was an idea that had nothing to do with checks and everything to do with chains. An idea that would require her to break her own rules and step completely into Leo Garza's world. Vivian Thorne left the Oakwood apartments that afternoon with a mission, but no plan. For the first time in her professional life, she was entering a market with no due diligence, no term sheet, and no clear metrics for success. Her first instinct, hardwired from decades in private equity, was to scale. If small acts had ripple effects, what could vast resources achieve? She started quietly. She didn't write a check to Leo. Instead, she had a team identify the most pressing material needs of the Oakwood complex. Within a week, a crew arrived to replace the ancient, failing boiler, not as a gift from a billionaire, but as a building efficiency grant they'd supposedly won. Leo was suspicious, but couldn't argue with warm apartments. Then she anonymously paid off the medical debts of every tenant in the building, using a labyrinthine network of medical debt charities to ensure the source was untraceable. She funded a free after-school program in the community room, staffed by qualified tutors, not volunteers. She was trying to inject capital into Leo's care economy without disrupting its culture. She was, in her mind, a silent venture capitalist in human goodness. But ecosystems are sensitive. The first crack appeared with Mr. Gable, the woodworker from 203. For years, He'd fixed wobbly chairs and broken toys for neighbors in exchange for a home-cooked meal or simple company. When the new after-school program offered professional carpentry classes, attendance at his informal workshop dropped to zero. His unique role in the building's social fabric, his source of purpose and connection, was rendered obsolete by a superior product. He didn't leave a note on the wall. He just became quieter, more withdrawn. Leo noticed. He saw the subtle strain in the building's social dynamics. Acts of mutual aid were slowly being replaced by the passive reception of services. The kindness wall saw fewer new notes. People started saying, "The program will handle it," instead of "I'll help you with that." The organic, peer-to-peer network was being centralized and in the process, sanitized. Vivian's well-funded infrastructure was accidentally starving the very thing it meant to nourish. Situation exploded into the open when a local news reporter, tipped off by a confused but grateful tenant about the mysterious debt erasure, ran a feel-good story. The headline read, "Secret Angel Wipes Out Debt for Entire Apartment Building." The story didn't name Vivian, but it described a philanthropic benefactor and mentioned the rescued dog incident. It took the internet approximately 47 minutes to connect the dots. Vivian Thorne, billionaire, was the secret angel. Overnight, the Oakwood apartments were under siege. News vans lined the street. Reporters knocked on doors. Leo's wall, his private tribute to his wife and his daughter's moral compass, became a public spectacle, photographed and analyzed. Maya's teacher called, concerned about classmates asking her for money. The building manager was fielding calls from people across the city asking how to get their debts paid. The quiet, functional care economy was now a media zoo. Vivian watched the crisis unfold from her penthouse with a sinking horror. Her strategy of silent injection had failed catastrophically. She had turned Leo's refuge into a target. She called him, her usual composure gone. "Leo, I am so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I'll make a statement. I'll take the heat." Leo's voice was calm, but it was the calm of deep exhaustion. "Taking the heat isn't the point, Vivian. You brought the fire. This wasn't your story to tell. These aren't your people to save. You saw a system you didn't understand and tried to optimize it. You broke it." "I was trying to pass it on," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You were trying to buy your way into the chain," he corrected, not unkindly. "But the chain isn't for sale. It's built on trust, not transactions. You made it a transaction the second you made it a secret. Now everyone here looks like a charity case, and I look like I don't even know what." The next blow came from Vivian's world. A business rival, sensing weakness, planted a story in the financial press. The angle was brutal. Thorne's pet project, Billionaire's guilt-driven charity, raises ethical questions. It suggested she was using the tenants as PR props to soften her corporate raider image. It quoted anonymous sources questioning Leo Garza's motives, hinting he had manipulated the situation for an eventual, bigger payout. The article reframed every act, poisoning the narrative. Vivian's involvement, intended to be invisible, had now contaminated the story with cynicism. The backlash within the Oakwood was immediate and painful. Some tenants, feeling patronized by the media portrayal, resented Leo for bringing the attention. Others questioned the free programs, worried about hidden strings. The sense of community, already strained, fractured into factions, the grateful, the resentful, and the embarrassed. The kindness wall, once a symbol of shared dignity, now felt like evidence in a public trial. The worst moment came for Maya. At school, a child from a wealthier family, repeating something he'd heard his parents say, told her, "My dad says your dad is a beggar who tricked a rich lady." Maya, who understood the wall better than anyone, came home in tears. Leo found her trying to take down her drawings, her small hands fumbling with pins. "Is it bad, Daddy? Is our wall bad?" That night, Leo made a decision. He called Vivian. "It's over. The programs, the grants, all of it. You need to end it. Pull out. Issue whatever statement you want, but say you're leaving the building alone. This has to stop." Vivian heard the finality in his voice and the pain underneath it. She also heard the echo of her father, "Never get emotionally invested in an asset." But Leo wasn't an asset. He was a man whose world she had invaded and destabilized. For the first time, she understood the true cost of her intervention. It wasn't just about disrupted dynamics. It was about a little girl ashamed of her own family's goodness. "Okay," Vivian said, her own voice thick. "I'll dismantle it, But let me fix the media problem first. I owe you that. Fixing it is what got us here, Leo said, and hung up. Vivian sat in the silence of her apartment, Argos at her feet. She had failed, not just tactically but fundamentally. She had tried to apply the rules of her world to his and had caused damage she didn't know how to repair. She thought about simply writing a check to make the problem go away, and the irony made her laugh, a hollow, joyless sound. That was the one solution guaranteed to make everything worse. Then she looked at Argos, and she thought of Maya trying to take her drawings off the wall. She thought of the chain, not as a system to be optimized, but as a fragile human connection to be protected. And a new, terrifying idea formed, not an idea of strategic giving, but of radical accountability. It would require her to step out from behind the curtain of money and anonymity and into the harsh, revealing light of the mess she'd made. It would mean using her power not to inject capital, but to absorb poison. To protect the chain, she would have to break her own most sacred rule. She would have to become the story. Vivian Thorne called a press conference, not in a corporate boardroom, but on the sidewalk in front of the Oakwood apartments, with the news vans already there as her audience. She stood without a podium, dressed not in her usual power suit, but in jeans and a simple sweater. Argos sat calmly at her side. She began not with a statement, but with an apology, a real one. She named every mistake, the checks, the anonymous interventions that felt like surveillance. The media circus her secrecy had fueled. She did not defend her intentions. She took full, unequivocal blame for the damage done to the community's peace and to Leo Garza's family. Then she did the one thing no one expected. She redirected the spotlight onto the wall, not as a curiosity, but as a blueprint. For years, I believed scale was the only measure of impact, she said, her voice clear in the cool air. More money, more programs, more reach. I was wrong. What exists inside that building is something more sophisticated than any corporate social responsibility initiative I've ever funded. It's a peer-to-peer network of care. My mistake was trying to be its banker when I should have been its student. She announced she was immediately ending all anonymous funding to the building. Instead, she was creating a simple, transparent fund to be managed by a committee of Oakwood tenants. Its sole purpose would be to match, dollar for dollar, the micro-investments neighbors made in each other. If Mr. Gable taught a carpentry class, the fund would pay for materials. If a neighbor used their own car to drive someone to a doctor, the fund would cover the gas. The capital was there, but the control, the dignity, the initiative, that would remain firmly with the people in the chain. She was stepping back from the engine and becoming, in her words, the guardrail. The media reaction was bifurcated. The business press called it a stunning abdication of strategic sense, a PR disaster. The social impact world called it revolutionary, but in the Oakwood, the reaction was cautious, then gradual acceptance. The tenant committee was formed. Leo, to everyone's surprise, agreed to sit on it, not as a leader, but as a guardian of the wall's original spirit. The first grant was awarded to Mr. Gable to run his woodworking workshop again, this time with proper tools and materials for everyone. The notes began to return to the kindness wall, now with small, printed addendums from the matching fund. Gas for Mrs. Chen's hospital trips matched. Art supplies for kids' class matched. The most significant change, however, was in Vivian herself. She didn't return to her insulated world. She started showing up, not with solutions, but with presence. She came to the building's potluck dinners, her famous camel coat looking out of place among puffer jackets. She helped set up chairs. She listened. She learned that Ms. Rivera in Fort Welve was a retired accountant and helped her organize a free tax prep clinic for the building. She used her contacts to get the local community college to recognize the building's informal skill shares as credits for continuing education. She became a connector, not a benefactor. A year after the sidewalk press conference, the unthinkable happened. Leo Garza invited Vivian Thorne over for dinner. It wasn't a formal peace treaty, it was spaghetti and meatballs at his kitchen table with Maya. The kindness wall had expanded onto a second panel. Among the new notes was one on expensive, watermarked stationery. It read, "Provided legal advice to tenant association. Learn to fix a leaky faucet from Leo." Passed on the advice to a startup founder who was exploiting his interns. He reformed his policies. The faucet still drips a little. The two economies weren't at war anymore. They were in dialogue. Vivian applied the Oakwood model to her own corporation. Thorn Solutions launched an internal time bank where employees could trade skills, coding lessons for Spanish lessons, resume help for gardening advice, with the company providing the platform and small resource grants to enact the trades. It became their most popular employee benefit, boosting morale and collaboration in ways free lunches never had. The final, surprising detail emerged quietly. Vivian used a portion of her personal wealth to establish a permanent endowment, not for the Oakwood, but for the city. It was called the Chain Reaction Fund. Its governing principle was lifted directly from Leo's cardstock motto. It offered small, no-strings-attached grants to existing, organic neighbor-helping neighbor initiatives across the city. The application was a story, not a spreadsheet. The first grant went to a group of teenagers who were repairing bicycles for free in a park. The fund bought them better tools. The wall had metastasized, not through force, but through example. On the anniversary of the day he saved Argos, Leo came home from work to find a small package at his door. No return address. Inside was a simple hand-forged copper bracelet. It was a continuous, unbroken loop, etched with tiny, intricate roots and branches. There was no note. He knew who it was from. He put it on. It fit perfectly. That evening, he and Maya added a final note to the original wall. It was a photograph of the bracelet with a caption written in Maya's careful handwriting. "The chain is a circle. It has no end. Love, Maya and Dad." The story that began with a refused check didn't end with an accepted one. It ended with a changed understanding of value. Leo's debt was never paid off with money. It was woven into the fabric of a community that grew stronger. Vivian Thorn didn't find her redemption in philanthropy, but in participation. She learned that the most powerful currency isn't stored in banks, but in the space between one person's need and another's willingness to meet it. The two of them, the maintenance man and the billionaire, never became traditional friends, but they became permanent links in each other's chains, proof that two different worlds could not only meet, but could actually make each other better. The wall in the apartment remained, a living archive, reminding everyone who saw it that some debts are not meant to be settled, but to be passed on forever. So what is the real lesson of the wall and the 3 refused checks? It's not that money is evil or that billionaires are out of touch. The lesson is more subtle and more challenging. It's that help, real help, is not just a transfer of resources. It is a transfer of dignity, and dignity cannot be purchased. It can only be honored. Leo Garza understood instinctively what psychologists have since documented, that intrinsic motivation, doing good for its own sake, is a powerful, self-sustaining force. But it's a fragile one. It can be crushed under the weight of a reward that turns a choice into a transaction. His refusals were a protective barrier around a sacred space where people could be helpers, not victims, agents, not beneficiaries. Vivian Thorn's journey was from seeing a problem to be solved to understanding a system to be supported. Her greatest contribution wasn't her money in the end. It was her willingness to absorb the criticism, to step into the glare, and to publicly recalibrate her own understanding of power. She learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to provide the platform and then get out of the way. The Oakwood Apartments and the thousands of chains it inspired stand as a quiet rebuttal to the myth of the heroic, solitary benefactor. They prove that transformation is a collective project. It happens in the small, unrecorded spaces between people, the held door, the shared meal, the tank of gas, the repaired bike. These are the molecules of a healthier society. And when we try to replace them with large, top-down solutions, we often accidentally dissolve the very bonds we're trying to strengthen. This story asks an uncomfortable question of all of us. When we see someone in need, what is our first impulse? Is it to fix it for them, or to ask what they need to fix it themselves? Is it to give from our surplus in a way that makes us feel good, or to invest in a way that makes them feel capable? The difference is everything. The kindness wall still exists. It's still growing. It is a living document of a simple, radical idea that we are not defined by what we accumulate, but by what we pass on. That our real legacy is not in our bank accounts, but in the chains of care we initiate and the ones we choose to join. Thank you for watching. If this story challenged the way you think about help, generosity, and the invisible economies that hold our world together, consider subscribing. We are dedicated to bringing you more documentaries that explore the profound in the everyday.